I'm guessing it still is morning, right? It is in Spain, where I live anyway. How many people here are involved in design, understand design, are designers? Okay, that's good. So I'm originally from New Zealand, so if you have a problem listening to my English with the accent, you'll understand why. I studied design in New Zealand, in Wellington, and I worked in New Zealand for about 7 years after I finished studying. After getting a bit tired of the small country, I thought, well, let's go and search around the world. And I found a job in New York at Smart Design, as was mentioned. And it was amazing, loved it, 5 years in New York. And the company asked me to open the European studio of Smart Design, and we ended up doing it in Barcelona. So amazing, love Barcelona. It's almost exactly opposite from where I was born on the planet, but it's an amazing place. Smart Design has now left Barcelona, and a colleague of mine at Smart and I decided to start Zinc. So today I'm going to talk about designing cohesive user experiences across the physical and digital domain. So a little bit about Zinc first. Well, we're a design and innovation lab for a connected, dynamic world. And I think technology is changing so fast, we have to change our approach to how we design experiences for those new technologies and new realities. We like to take a lean entrepreneurial approach. We want to be really flexible in the way we work, working with startups, sometimes taking equity, building collaborations with partners and producing our own products, but also working with corporates when they want to do things in a slightly different way rather than heavy labored process. And we work across hardware and software. And that's a real key for us. It's really that intersection where we think we really thrive. So as I mentioned, we want to be lean. We want to be common sense approach. We don't just do months and months of research for the sake of it. We do it when we really are looking to try and find an answer. We really are human-centered or user-centered. Sometimes we work with pets, so we're sometimes pet-centered as well. We are optimistic, we're playful, and we really want to create a new environment where it's not an old-school type of consultancy. It's a real collaborative lab type of approach. And we like to play in different areas, like we're really excited about what's happening with Bitcoin and blockchain technologies, really excited about robotics. In fact, we have our own robotics project going on right now. Fintech, of course, consumer experiences, consumer goods is really a lot of my history. And of course, smart cities. So, cities are the ultimate environment that people live within. And at the moment, we're actually doing some mentorship with a Cognicity program in the city in London. We like to stay small. We want to stay small, but we want to be really, really good. And to be good, you need the right team. So we have a small core in our studio, and then we search our network. My partner and I are not from Spain. He's from the UK. I'm from New Zealand, as I mentioned. And we've worked all over the world. So we really tap into that network that we've developed. And we think this is really good advice to always reference those guys you've worked with in the past, bring them onto the team, and it really helps you to create the right team for that innovation challenge that you're facing, and also helps you with understanding the regionality. So at Zinc, it's really about user understanding. It's about leveraging technology in new ways. It's about software design and development. It's about hardware design and development. And it's really about creating those overall seamless experiences. Experiences that really transcend the physical and the digital, that really have the user at the heart. So why user-centered design? Why is it important? So it's really about, what is it? Well, first of all, it's putting the user in the center of that process. You're always referencing the user from the very beginning. You do a deep dive to understand really what they're going through in their life in a general sense. You don't ask them what they want. You kind of uncover through other questions about what they really want and need. So it's really understanding the context of use. It's about identifying those key insights that will help drive development throughout the process. It's about crafting concepts that really better fit with the user that you're aiming. It's about visualizing scenarios of those concepts that really show those different points in context, those interaction points that you may have, and really understanding that in nuance. It's about, designing stuff that looks good, and basically, we believe that user-centered design is good design, and good design ultimately is good business. So an example of what we've been up to in the last couple of years, this was a project we did earlier last year. Some entrepreneurs came to us and said, we want to create this company that really addresses the needs women have of understanding what's going on in their body during pregnancy. What is the right information? What should I do? What lifestyle choices should I make? And they had a history in body technology. They actually came from IMEC, which is a R&D center out of Belgium and the Netherlands. So they had really great expertise in terms of what they do, sensing the body, transferring the data, understanding that data. And they had a goal to create a huge crowdsourced data, pool of data that they could make some analysis on that would help to understand what's going on with preterm birth and the effects of preterm birth for our population. But they needed to get that data from individual women. They needed women to actually wear sensors on their body during pregnancy. So how could we encourage women to actually wear these things? And the real key was to understand them. What do they need? How do we actually create information at the right time, at the right place that would help her make those lifestyle choices that could, improve her odds of not having a preterm baby? So this is an example of, in the field, we asked women to, which one's the tracker here? Yeah, there we go. So this one here is actually someone hand writing down their contractions towards the end of their pregnancy. This is like looking at the emotional and physical journey that they've been on. Over here, we talk about who's in their network, who supports them. And we do like card sorts, and we take photos of their home, and it's a very casual conversation. In fact, we actually had some people say to us, could we have the audio recording of our conversation, because it's the only time I've actually really described my pregnancy in full to anyone before. So that's really exciting. Of course, you gather a lot of information, and you need to start to synthesize that. So synthesis is a huge part of the user-centered design approach. You bring the team together, you put everything on the wall, you talk about the options, you talk about the technology you might use, you talk about what's the business model that we might use for this particular product. Does it meet the needs of the woman? Does it meet our global needs of trying to collect this data? And you kind of build this kind of like large bucket of insights, you could say, but the really important ones seem to bubble up. And in this case, we looked at different things different services that could be produced for the woman in the first trimester, second and third, or even beyond. And we felt the greatest need was actually around contractions. So we came up with some concepts of how the sensors would fit on the body. We took them back into the field, talked to some of the same women we talked to earlier, and some new women as well. And we kind of got them to play with them, to put them on, to tell us what functions they would like in the app or in the digital platform. So they were able to kind of like look at the physicality of it, play with kind of paper prototypes, and really give us some really good insights into how we should develop the service. And then, of course, sequencing, going backwards and forwards between the physical and digital. So you look at the experience over time, and you kind of look at the needs of the engagement of the user, and then what happens physically, what happens digitally, and you kind of map that out, and you try and find efficiencies and commonalities that kind of make sense in the overall experience, rather than saying, oh, you need to hold on to this while you press a button, while you're putting the sensor on. You've got to avoid those kind of clashes between the physical and digital interaction. As a startup, they also needed to kind of find their brand, their voice. So we knew that talking to mums, it wasn't going to be a sporty app, and it wasn't going to be a medical app. So we had to find something that made sense for them. And really working through the brand for the company, but also for the tone of voice of the app. How was the information presented? Is it got the voice of a doctor or of your midwife, or perhaps your sister who's had a child before? And of course, it's getting into the details, right? So nuancing out the size and shape of the device, both physically and, of course, digitally, working through wireframes, looking at how data can be communicated, and then kind of making sense of all that. And then starting to really bring it together. So here's the contraction patch and the first screen of the app. There's kind of commonality between the experience. You get a quick look at your app. You can see how your day's doing. But also, there's LEDs in the actual sensor itself that help to color code the functionality. So throughout the application, you get a link between the sensor itself and the different functions of the app. And then it's actually more than just for contraction. So it's actually a system that you can wear on your belly, in a bra clip, on your wrist. And it's really about trying to create these objects that people love and will be happy to wear, and providing the information that they really need at the right time. So what was that? That was, that's where we are now. That's, designing user-centered experiences across the physical and digital. But we're starting to see things change, right? At the moment, we employ product designers, interaction designers, developers, engineers, and they're all kind of separated. And we're kind of doing our best to kind of mash them all together. And I think that's really where our strength is. But we're seeing that more and more as technology is getting more complicated. There's many more opportunities, for example, augmented reality or virtual reality, robotics. These are worlds that are just going to go crazy in the near future. So how do I make sense of all that? How do I actually create experiences that people will love on these platforms? So here's a little list of things that we take as like a rule of thumb. So understand your user. I think that's fairly obvious, but the reason to do that is because they're the ones that are going to use it at the end. So you can find that small little nugget of truth that can help drive insight, drive the personality of the products and services that you're making, that will better connect to them. Of course, if they love it, they're going to buy it, they're going to recommend it to their friends, hence growth. Understand that user-centered is not enough anymore. It's really about understanding the culture of where you're at, the market where you are, the subculture, but also the context of use, whether it's in the home, it's in the gym, it's at work, wherever. Really understanding that. So when you go and talk to people, don't just do a static interview in their home. That's great. That's a good first step. But actually follow them and talk to them in their life. Observe. Look at the culture and context of how people use similar services. It can be really helpful to kind of give a perspective to where you should go. And then look at the interaction complexity. I know most of the people here are dealing in digital apps and web, but there's the complexity all the way from a simple spoon, how you use it. You know that there's a handle on one end, and the other thing goes in your mouth, right? So it's pretty simple complexity. At the other end of the scale, you've got super complicated biosystems like the space shuttle. And then between, you've got this world that we're really grappling with, looking at the different levels of complexity. So really try and understand that and address that within the overall context. As I mentioned before, mixed teams, mixed process. So look at the problem you're trying to solve. Try and kind of, let's call it, framework out a process. Don't always stick to the same process. Think about the problem and how is the best, most efficient, lean way to solve it. Then think of the team that you need to really make that happen. And here you can see it's really about going beyond your core. Bring in people from the outside. When you're talking about stagnating in a lot of corporate culture, the reason why I wanted to move away from dealing with corporates was because of that. Oftentimes they were very reluctant to listen to people coming from the outside. So keep loose, bring people in and out. I think it's really valuable. Visualize it. So if you can visualize your problem, you've got a much better chance of being able to visualize your solution. So we have this thing called a visual canvas, and it gives us a kind of a guide to kind of plaster our walls with information from those fields. So it's complicated, right? Technology, business, people, there's a lot going on. If you're a startup, it's really hard to put your head into that space with all that going on. So break it out a little bit. In terms of users, culture, society, business ideas, distribution ideas, and put it up there on the wall, right? Make it visual. You can engage people in better conversations if they can see what you're talking about. And then start crafting those meaningful interactions. You don't have to have a wow moment every moment, but look at where that moment really matters. And you can do that by kind of like breaking down the different elements from, system level, feature level, to the micro interaction level. And I think really understanding what's relevant, meaningful, and then delightful, you can help kind of build a kind of a library of meaningful interactions. Sequence the problem, storyboard the solution. So again, if you're really trying to understand your problem, and oftentimes these experiences happen over time, you need to put it up there again, and we use Post-its a note to kind of like say, how does the user first find awareness of the problem and the solution? What's the first touch point? What happens after that? So we kind of sequence out the problem, and then we sequence out the solution. So storyboards is something that we use a lot of. For example, here you can see how someone uses an app in a cafe. So they walk in, they sit down, they engage, they hop onto their phone, and then these magical things happen. This is for an augmented reality experience that we created a while ago. So it's kind of breaking it down, storyboarding it out, both physically and digitally. Don't just stick to wireframes on your screen. Let's get it out from the screen, make it real, make it happen. And of course, we all know about prototyping and testing, but you can do paper prototyping. You can do things really, really cheaply. You don't have to do split testing on day one. You can create a very simple mock-up out of Lego and then talk to people about the volume and how they might handle that. And you can also take people through and prototype in context. Here we were designing an interface for a dishwasher. And of course, I think it's pretty important, do sweat the details. Everyone says when you're a startup, don't sweat the details. Well, I think often the details are really, really important. They help create consistency and authenticity in the experience. So look at all the little parts, like for example, this printer that I created for HP. The idea was that it opened up. The delight in touching that button and this thing opens up for you was something that people always said they really loved about this printer. And so they used it more, they used more paper, they used more ink. HP was happy. So an ending thought, as I mentioned before, the world is getting pretty complicated. We're layering this whole virtual digital layer on top of the physical one. And that means things are getting a little bit complicated. How do we move between them more fluidly? I think the truth is, we talk about that technology moving very fast and how it has impact on all our aspects of life. And our current approach, which is kind of looking physical, looking digital, looking interior design, looking service design, I think it's changing. Soon it's just going to be design. And we need to actually help our designers and developers and engineers to understand this new reality. So I think it's time to build a new approach to design for integrated contextual experiences. Thank you very much.